Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hafidades and Thero. Welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. In 2022, the Northern Marianas Humanities Council conducted Iminagahit Edlet, Reporting the Truth in the Marianas. It was a project created to raise awareness of the functions of the media that are important to the democratic process in the Marianas. The project produced a media survey to examine media literacy, media use and perceptions, and civic attitudes among residents. The results of that project were presented in a forum with professionals in Saipan at the end of the year. But the council recently took the results of that survey to a very unique group of young people. The journalism class of Joycelyn Atlig at Rota Junior Senior High School, as well as juniors and seniors at the school. Leading the outreach were the council's program coordinator, Naomi Tudela, and participants were Tomas Manglona, he's the chief correspondent journalist of KUAM, Andrea Limol, a journalist with the Marianas Variety, Mark Rabago, associate editor and journalist with the Saipan Tribune, and myself. We took advantage of the opportunity to engage the young people with the survey in a unique and age-appropriate way, shall we say. Starting us off was Tomas with a discussion on ethics and what it looks like to be a journalist and how is news made.
We said I'm from here. I sat right there for lunch every day in middle school. And actually, this cafeteria was one of the very first places I started reporting. I bought a recorder right across the street where there's that barbecue area. It was a $25 recorder, and I started recording the parent-teacher conferences. And I would write about them on my blog, Luta Pago, which means Rota Today, which is still up. So you can look at my writing from middle school. And I encourage you to do the same. You don't need to work for organizations like this to get your writing out. We all know that, right? Posting on TikTok. You can all do that yourself. And so today, I wanted to talk about what it really looks like to be a journalist, right? When we talk about being the media, oftentimes it's just what you get on your Facebook, it's what you get on your TikTok. But how does it get there, right? It's people like Catherine, Mark, Kay, and myself who, for mainstream media or the traditional media who've been around, that's our job. Our job is to give you information. Whether that's on TikTok or wherever else that might be. And so first I wanted to show you a few news clips. Does anyone see what's different here or what might be an issue with these news clips? All right, you're right. They're biased. They're not news. They're opinion, right? If you look at the labeling, it's an opinion guest essay. It's an opinion piece. And this is a commentator, not a news journalist or straight news show. And so what does this tell us, right? That sometimes when we see things presented as news, it might not necessarily be based solely on facts, unbiased reporting that Kay and Mark do for the Variety and Tribune, right? What we do is an opinion, it's fact. We get facts, we get information from reliable sources. So just because something's posted online, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's fact or true. Everyone's entitled to an opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts, right? There's a set of facts that we can all work from. And so with that being said, I wanted to ask, what is news? Who can tell me what is news? What is news? When you think of news, what do you think of? Information, reporting, right? Oftentimes I tell people the definition is in the word, new, right? It's new. It's something we didn't know before that we're being informed about. So all of your answers are right. And so now I wanted to do an activity. We're going to come up with 5 news stories that relate to the island of Rota or your school. Who wants to volunteer one idea? All right, new basketball court, another story idea. Okay, and so I wanted to first, what we did is what a lot of newsrooms do. It's called pitching, right? You're pitching your story, right? You're a pitzer. And so usually at the start of every day, you would come together and you would talk about the biggest ideas or biggest stories. And some newsrooms you would write it up on a board, right? So this is our Rota newsroom today, right? The Bug Battalion newsroom. And so now one thing that newsrooms also do is decide the importance of a story. For Mark and Kay, that means what makes it onto the front page. When you log into mvariety.com or saipantribune.com, what's the header? What's the photo? And for TV news, as Joy would know, you would stack your stories. Which story do we show first? For how long, right? So we're just going to take 30 seconds in your group. I want you to think about how would you rank these stories, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories. You're going to number them 1 to 5 based on most important and least important. Basically, what should people know first on Rota? And so as the editor, we're going to think about how to prioritize things. And so the first story is new basketball court for the Rota High School. The second story is Rota election. The other story is yard Christmas decoration. The growing interest of soccer. And then the last story is corruption. And so let's just do this as a big group. Which story would you put on the front page first? All right. That's very clear from you all. Corruption is our top story. We don't know what type of corruption, but corruption. And then what would our second story be? Election. What would our third story be? We have basketball court, Christmas decoration, and soccer. What would our third story be? Our third story would be soccer? The yard? All right, the yard people are really... So in your newsroom, you got to advocate, right? When you're a journalist, you have to advocate because whether it's Mark who's your editor or Joycelyn who's your news director, I'm going to advocate why my story should be first, right? That's what you do as a journalist if you care. So yard people, I heard you loud and clear as your editor. So what would be the fourth story? All right. And the fifth story? All right, so on tomorrow's front page and tonight's primetime newscast, we're going to lead off with corruption. Then we're going to talk about the Rota election. Then we're going to talk about the yard Christmas decoration. Then we're going to talk about the new basketball court. And then we're going to wrap up our newscast talking about a really good story about the interest of soccer. Mark, what do you think about this lineup? Mark is an editor, so would you agree, Mark?
On Saipan, everybody reads the sports page first. That's the back page. So I won't argue about the front page stories. But in the sports lineup you had, I would take soccer first. Because World Cup just finished, 4 billion views, right? So soccer rules. I love basketball. I'm a basketball player myself. So even at an advanced age. But yeah, soccer rules. Thanks, guys.
All right. And so Mark did something a lot of newsmakers, a lot of news decision makers need to do, right? Which is put these stories in context.
We'll be back with more after this break.
I Northern Marianas Humanities Council bulaguinahanya puri historian Marianas dan kultura. Sinyon soda esisihanan formasyon gi zon mami website nmhcouncil.org. Pat bisita gi YouTube, pat Facebook. Guajalokwi diferentes clases le blunesinya un fan. I Northern Marianas Humanities Council Hazuzura todo I experiencian tautau.
Welcome back to your Humanities Half Hour. We are listening in on a workshop that the council recently had with students at Dr. Rita S. Enos Junior Senior High School in Rota. And it's related to their project, Iminagahit Edlet. Looking at the functions of the media and the democratic process here in the Marianas. In addition to Chief Correspondent Journalist Tomas Manglona, K. Andrea Limol of The Variety and Mark Rabago of Saipan Tribune also had the opportunity to share about how they entered the field of journalism.
Hi, everyone. So I think some people have this misconception that you have to study journalism in college to become a journalist, but you don't. You can have whatever degree, whatever experience, and still be a reporter. So I started off wanting to go to law school, and then when I got my degree in political science, I decided that law school doesn't really make me happy. So what does make me happy? What am I good at? And ever since I was a little kid, I was always told that I ask too many questions and I write a lot. So I thought, maybe I can be a reporter, because that's what you do, right? You ask a lot of questions and you write stories. But there's more to it than that, which we're going to talk about more later on. But yeah, so I was born on Saipan, and I moved around a lot as a kid. I've lived on KUAM, Saipan, most of my childhood in Hawaii. Also spent some time in Chuuk, then went off to college. And then my mom moved our family back to Saipan. So after I graduated, that's where I ended up. And it was funny because I got here in September 2019, and just a few months, I got the job at Variety because they needed someone new, a fresh face to talk to the governor, because our reporters were having a hard time reaching him. That's public information. I've shared that story before. And then it was like my first week there, and then the next week, the government shut down because of the pandemic. And ever since then, I've just been covering everything: the government, environmental beat, community, business, military beats, all throughout the pandemic. So I got to really see what the CNMI was like since the beginning of the epidemic. So I guess the main takeaway that I hope you have is that you don't necessarily need to have to study journalism to become a reporter. You could have majored maybe in, physical therapy or what have you, but you don't necessarily have to study that to become a reporter. So that was my journey, and I'm still here. And now I'm studying environmental sciences, hoping to one day be an environmental journalist. So that's my story.
Just like Kate, I was supposed to take up law, but it was so boring. It was a summer after, or was it before, graduating from college, that I had a summer job where I had to summarize legal briefs, and I just couldn't get over the legalese, which are a term for smart speak or something like that. That's very hard. They use a lot of jargons in legal terms. So, but even before, when I was in elementary, I was always looking forward for the newspaper to come. You know, the newspapers that they deliver at the house, not that you read on your cell phone or your laptops. We had newspapers, or actual newspapers, physical newspapers before. So I would read them from the front page to the back page, but I dwell mostly reading the sports page because I've always liked sports. So fast forward 2001, I was recruited to work for Saipan Tribune. That was like after a couple of years working for Manila Times and Philippine Post and Philippine Star in the Philippines. So I got here, and I wasn't in sports actually. I was working as a beat reporter for local news. I covered Capitol Hill. I covered community. I covered what else? Basically the whole gamut of beats. But I think the mobile games came around like a year after I was here, or probably a few months. And they needed somebody to cover it. It's baseball, if you don't remember. It's mobile games. It's Rota, Guam, Tinian, Saipan, and it's baseball. down in Oliai Sports Complex. So I had to cover it. I didn't know anything about baseball, but I liked sports, so I was given that job. And I think I did pretty well because after that, they told me just stay in sports, do sports. And after a while, I think they liked what I was doing, so they promoted me to associate editor, but still responsible for sports. So 15 years later, I'm still there. I still write sports stories. I write business stories. I'm a correspondent for several media, and I came back like a couple of years ago writing for Manila Times. They say it's an honor to write a column because they appreciate your work and your expertise in the field. So that's something I'm really proud of. That's my story. Thank you.
It's kind of hard to say what's our favorite, but I think personally for me, I would say just hearing from the community. The government can be kind of overwhelming for me just because of a lot of things that are going on, but I love doing community stories. I love hearing about new businesses opening up, or like this kid who has like a lemonade stand, or like these farmers who have been farming for a long time and they're affected by climate change. I love those community stories because it's the community. These are the people. These are people want to hear from other people within their community and the struggles that they have, because there might be someone else out there who can also relate, right? And it'll help them realize that they're really not alone. So I just really love hearing from the people. As much as I love covering the government beat, I love the community beat so much more because you meet so many different types of people and you hear of their struggles. These are real people and real life struggles. And so just having their story told, right, to the community, it helps raise awareness of the issues that the working class face. And people who were affected by the pandemic, for example, and lost their jobs. How are they making ends meet, right? So that's personally my favorite part of the job, is just hearing those stories and being entrusted with telling those stories and putting it out to the community. That's definitely my favorite part of the job.
World peace. No, I'm just kidding. My favorite part of the job is a lot of what Kay said. But if you think about it, our job is to talk to people, right? Like if you're not a journalist and you're just kind of talking to people, asking them questions about why they're doing things, you might be, a stalker or a creep. We're professional stalkers. But really, what other job can you have where you pick up the phone and they talk to you simply because you're a journalist, right? How great is that, right? I could walk into any home or building or agency and say, I'm a reporter and I have some questions. And the other person would have at least some understanding, saying, okay, what are your questions? So I think to me that's such a special process that we have the privilege to just walk into people's lives and hopefully do a good job leaving it better than we found it. So yeah, talking to people is my favorite part.
With Thomas just talking about picking up the phone and calling people randomly, well, not randomly, but officials, right? So we had a discussion a few days ago that some reporters actually, when they do that, they feel like they're trying to get somebody's identity, like information for credit card or something, or a scam, like what is your age, where do you work, where were you born? But that's part of our job. So yeah, I agree with them. The best part of reporting is dealing with people, trying to get their experiences, their achievements, especially for sports. I always said, even in Saipan, when we had these discussions in Saipan, sports is way, way cooler than reporting about the government. Because government, everybody criticizes you. Everything's bad news. Not everything, but mostly. Probably, roughly 60%, right? In sports, you talk about achievements. Somebody's goals were achieved. They won. Well, there was a losing side, but that's part of competition. And then you talk about somebody who went to the States. Somebody, like, for instance, the latest is the swimmers who went to Australia to compete at World Championships. 9 national records set. Wow, right? So it shows that even though you're a small island, you're not winning gold, bronze, or silver. As long as you do your best and beat national records, that's it. Before, I used to criticize Bill Sakovic, who was the swimming coach for the national team before, why are we reporting something about breaking records or personal best times when we didn't win any gold medals? Well, 20 years after, now I know. We're a small island. We cannot be like the US. We cannot be like Russia. We cannot be like China. We do our best, and that's what counts.
What story have you done that has touched you the most deeply?
So I'm really happy that you asked that question, because I actually just recently worked on this story of this 79-year-old woman who was orphaned as a result of the Korean War. And she took this DNA test and found out that she's 50% Micronesian. And so now she's on this search to find her Micronesian family. So her entire life, she had no idea. She still has no idea where she's from in Micronesia, who she's related to. And so she reached out, and I actually reached out to her daughter because I saw her post on social media. And I really wanted to do a story on that because I was like, who knows? Your family might be here in the CNMI. They might be here somewhere or on Guam or somewhere throughout the region, and they might see this story. And so I was really, really happy to cover that story. And she shared of her struggles of being orphaned because of the Korean War and then being adopted to a family in the U.S. And her entire life, she never really knew where she came from. And now that she's she's 79 years old, right? And she wants to find her family, and she's hoping that if she passes away, that her kids will be able to find their family and just reunite and just be reconnected with their family. And so that story really touched me because, man, I was trying to put myself in her shoes. I was like, man, I never really realized how blessed I am to know my family history. You know, not a lot of people can say that. Not a lot of people can trace their history back multiple generations. And here's this woman who just finds out that she's 50% Micronesian and she's 79 years old. And she's like, man, I really want to find my family. I want to find my family before I die. And so that story really touched me. And I'm so glad that my editor decided to put it out as the top story the very next day. And I'm actually going to mail copies of that paper to the family. And so I hope you guys read that story online. And maybe if you end up taking that DNA test to 23andMe, who knows, you might be related to her. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, a lot of stories have meant a lot to me because it's hard to separate yourself sometimes. When I was on Guam, we did a lot of stories, on crime, people impacted by crime. Just before I moved to Saipan, I visited the home of a mom and her toddler that was just burned down because she forgot a candle inside her home, and I walked through her burnt home with her. With everything just destroyed. So, you have those stories that there's no way to not feel anything, right? People are suffering. But there was one story that I found while I was on Guam that has a Rota connection. A fisherman, his name is Frank. He has a boat, and he transports people to and from Saipan and Rota to Guam because the flights are too full and expensive, and also because things like he had to bring someone on his boat whose wheelchair couldn't fit in the small aircraft that we have. He also had to transport a coffin because the coffin couldn't fit in the aircraft. So that's one story that will never leave my mind because we know how hard it is to get to and from places here, especially if you're on Rota, right? Even sometimes getting food or clothes or whatever else you might need can be hard to get if you can't find it here. So, yeah, that story's online, and Frank still does it. He does it for free. And just think about it. If you had a family member who had a coffin that couldn't fit or be transported, what do? Where does that leave us? So I think a lot of the stories that I like to report on and that touch me are about everyday people just overcoming odds.
Instead of a story, I'd like to share collective coverage Saipan Tribune did during the Pacific Mini Games last June. I think I started as the only, because of manpower woes, I was the only writer of sports for a few months. And thankfully we had recruited somebody for local, but I saw that that she had an interest in sports, so I taught her the ropes. So she joined me in the coverage, but that's not enough. We were like dealing with 12 countries coming here to play the mini games, since over 1,500 athletes and probably 200 more officials coming in. So I had to ask the company for some interns like you, still in high school, junior high school. So we took 3 in. So armed with that small band of reporters/interns, we taught them for like 2 months. Then off we go. We went to cover mini games. There were some hit and miss, but eventually we pulled through. I think we did a darn good job in covering the mini games. So much so that at the end of the games, they would select one media to represent the whole island to vote on the athletes of the games. And Saipan Tribune was selected. So we got to vote who will be the athletes of the games. So I'm pretty proud about that achievement. And also, another memorable experience was going to Fiji back in 2003. So if you want to be a reporter, you could go to a lot of places, encounter a lot of cultures, and see a lot of stuff. So it's a career worth looking at.
In addition to the personal stories, Tomas also had the opportunity to share 3 types of conversations anybody can have with the media, beginning with on the record.
If you're talking with the governor, usually you would want it on the record. So on the record doesn't mean the source or the person I'm interviewing says, these terms have to be agreed upon by each person, the journalist and the interviewee. So on the record means everything I say to you, you can use. You can put on the TV, you can put on the paper. Off the record, what do you think that means? You can't use it. Right? It means that I can't use anything you told me, and we're going to agree on it. Maybe because you don't want to be exposed, you don't want to get in trouble, so you tell it to us off the record. And the reason why some people might do that is because they say, I just want to give you a tip and let you know where to look. But off the record means it's off the record. You can't use it if it's agreed upon. So, and on background means that I'm not going to quote you, but I'm going to use the information to inform my reporting. And I just wanted to share that with you. So if you're ever speaking with a journalist, just ask them, how are we talking? Is this something that's on the record? Is it off the record? Can I tell you this on background? It's not really that formal, every time we're out at a public event and we go to the governor, we're not going to be like, this is an on-the-record conversation, right? You don't necessarily do that each time. If you're in a public place, if it's a press conference, it's already established that it's public. So everything you say, is going to be used. But it's more so in the one-to-one interactions.
We've been listening in on excerpts from the Council's recently forum at Dr. Rita S. Enos Junior Senior High School in Rota about their project Imanagahit Edlet, reporting the truth in the Northern Mariana Islands. We had a great time engaging the students of the journalism class there, the only journalism class in the CNMI, as well as the juniors and seniors. If you'd like to know more about this project, visit the Council's website at nmhcouncil.org. This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
Your Humanities Half Hour is a production of the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, funded in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.